Ah, yes, the sovereign wealth fund, death trap, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. Call it whatever you want. I'm just glad that Mark Carney has Canada's finances completely under control, like the cost-cutting pragmatist he was elected to be. I mean, you guys are right. Conservatives need to stop complaining. You know what they say: when life gives you lemons, you let your opponent squeeze those things directly into your eyeballs as much as they want, repeatedly, because that is the cost of voting blue. Now, understand, I'm not totally against this. I, like 37% of decided voters in Canada, also somewhat support Mark Carney. May 11th, 2026. This is the Comic Reporter, and I don't know about all of you, but I live two very separate lives. One is offline, and one of them is online. It's almost entirely two different personalities. One that is comfortable saying whatever he wants and making everyone laugh, and then they just go about their day like nothing happened. And then there's the online one, where if one person disagrees, then it's almost as if the world has been set on fire and the only place left to complain about it is in my chat. Wild. I'm about as comfortable with this sovereign wealth fund as I am with a 5-year-old doing a root canal on a blue whale standing in a puddle just outside of Marineland after it was shut down. Not only is it just flat out funny, it's also impossible, and I'm not even sure it's entirely legal. But if 37% of Canada somewhat supports it, I guess that's what we want. I'm not a fan of fruitcake. Listen, I'm not a fan of the sovereign wealth fund, but I'm not a fan of fruitcake either. And a lot of people put that on a credit card. So, I mean, if you're willing to go into debt to get it, who am I to say you're wrong? I do think it's funny that anyone finds it surprising that 37% of Canadians somewhat support the sitting prime minister. Yeah, I mean, what did you expect? People were just going to instantly revolt against the dude you just elected? It took people a year to stop elbowing each other in the face. You really think they were, you know, you really think they would come to their senses in what, a year? No. 300, you really thought that 365 days later they just suddenly go back to being sane? No, no, of course not. They want to believe they made the right decision. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. Sometimes a blind squirrel finds a nut. All I know is those people aren't dead yet, so it's not that bad. Not entirely. He hasn't completely let them down. Look, no matter how bad the sovereign death Look, no matter how bad the sovereign death look, sorry, that's my outside voice. The sovereign debt fund is that the whole sunk cost fallacy thing doesn't just apply to wealth, it also applies to elections. Plus, it's only been a year and it's not like Carney attends question period anymore, so we're not really even sure how he's feeling or what he's even doing. We don't know what he's up to. We just know 37% of Canadians somewhat approve of him being prime minister. Now, we don't know why, and I'm not sure they do either. They just somewhat approve because he's prime minister, I guess. Actually, we do know why they somewhat approve. But we'll get to that later. Here's what I know for sure. Mark Carney has never set me on fire while stealing my wallet. He's not Jagmeet Singh, so that's a plus. No boxing videos during an election campaign. That's a plus. That's a reason for, that is a reason for somewhat, that is a reason to somewhat approve of his actions thus far. He didn't burn down any churches, run any trucks into bridges, at least not personally, and he didn't personally cost the Ottawa Senators a chance at the Stanley Cup just by being alive. So there's that. So yes, I somewhat support. It seems reasonable. He's taught Pierre Poilievre everything he needs to know about how not to present yourself to the public, so that's a win. Plus, he's setting a very low bar for Canadian expectations, so whoever comes after him is going to be a superhero. Yeah, that's how low the bar is. Now our superheroes. So now, now to be considered a Canadian superhero, all you have to do is not sell half your infrastructure to China and be able to stand up straight. That's the bar. That's the bar. Look, That somewhat approved portion of Mark Carney's support is literally just the voters telling the pollsters that they aren't ready to go back to the polls yet. They're tired. It has nothing to do with Pierre. It has nothing to do with Carney. It's literally just no, I don't like some of this stuff, but I still see a way it could work. And quite frankly, I'm not willing to sit through any more of that stupid political stuff right now. I support the prime minister. Stop calling me during dinner. That's what the voter is telling the pollster. It's just a revolt against a phone call while you're just all you're trying to do is warm up your pizza. It's that easy. That's what it is. Somewhat support is literally just I don't want to vote right now. That's it. That's it. That's no grand conspiracy. And the worst part of the screaming and hollering from the mainstream and independent media is that they all know it. All of them, every single one. Whether they're pumping Pierre's tires or shining Carney's shoes, everyone knows the polls at this point are just a measurement of how tired Canadians are of politics. They're tired. I'm tired. Everyone should be tired. It's fine. Just sit down, take a load off. Go on a micro adventure. It's fine. Everything's fine. You're fine. I'm fine. We're all fine. All you need right now is strongly worded letters. I'm sure self-immolation is right around the corner, but for now, yeah, just a letter to your MP will work just fine. And really, it's not just tired of politics that people are being. It's tired of watching the USA keep winning. You can't stop them. They just win gold medal after gold medal. And quite honestly, it's depressing. Here we thought that the US success was somehow tied directly to Canada doing well. That's why they kept allowing us to screw with the border and be a pain in their ass. But it turns out that's not true. They were just being stupid. Stupider than us, which is quite the quite the accomplishment. And when they decided to stop being stupid, suddenly we are the ones in trouble. That's all it took. That's what it took. The USA stops being stupid, and now we have to stop. Now the USA stops being stupid, and now we have to stop being stupid. And quite honestly, that's really difficult to do. Personally, I'm glad we have a man who isn't stupid guiding us through these dangerous and divided times, and Mark Carney there to help him. Meaning, I somewhat support him too, in case you didn't hear. I know you think I'm going to wrap this into some joke about Mark Carney stealing Pierre Poilievre's ideas, but no, that joke has run its course. We all know that Mark couldn't do this without Pierre, because no matter how many people say they voted for Carney, I'm not sure they realize, or maybe they do. What they actually voted for was Pierre wearing a Carney skin suit. So that's not what I'm talking about. Just because he's stealing all the conservative ideas and using them because they're good ideas doesn't mean those people actually voted for Pierre. It is funny the person I'm talking about is even more obviously running Canada, and that is that it's funny to watch Donald Trump run Canada without even trying. Doesn't even have to lift a finger. I never realized how much of a muppet our government and business sector was until I watched the elephant roll over and the mouse pretend that it could withstand the impact. It's very eye opening. No wonder we have to go further into debt to get people to work with us. Our economy was made of styrofoam and cellophane. Oh, wild. And no, no one is escaping responsibility for this after 10 years of Trudeau and 1 year of Carney, preceded by 10 years of Harper and 10 years of Chrétien. What exactly did you think would happen? Turns out voting for the guy who hands out the most money without ever considering who is footing their bill just leads to more people needing the government's money. That's consequences. You train people to be lazy, they become lazy. But what can you do except somewhat support the man who was democratically elected to create the framework for us to build this country to the point where we remember to get out of the elephant's way when it decides the mouse is not actually the scary one? Would things have been different under Pierre? Yeah, very different. Just as hard, maybe even harder, but different. Probably better much quicker. A much deeper commitment with a faster and likely stronger result. But that's all supposition. I'm basing that on the plan, but I'm not basing that on the plan, but on the current reality. So instead, just like everyone else, I somewhat support Mark Carney, not as a liberal, but as a conservative who just wants to see something happen that doesn't have another 30-year mortgage attached to it. The problem with polling, like the support polls for the current prime minister, is that it takes a spectrum of reasons for the responses people give and forces them into binary data points. mean, do you somewhat support Mark Carney or do you somewhat oppose Mark Carney? Let me fill you in on something. If you answer somewhat support, you also somewhat oppose. And if you somewhat oppose, you also somewhat support. Therefore, you support and oppose Mark Carney at the same time. You could do both. And my answer will depend on the day and what he's up to when you call me. Somewhat is a useless measurement. To somewhat support the Prime Minister, I also have to somewhat oppose him. That's the catch. But yeah, tired is the word. I somewhat support because I'd like to eat dinner without hearing from from a call center employee or a robot with an answering machine. So if the pollster calls me and says, "Do you support our prime minister?" I will say, "Yes, I somewhat support Mark Carney." I'm going to say I'm part of the 57%. And so is about 70% of Canada.